Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever. Whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. We are honored to have as our guest today Congressman Bobby Scott. For 30 years, he's represented the citizens of Virginia's 3rd Congressional District. He's the ranking member of the Committee on Education and the Workforce, advancing legislation that protects students, workers, and seniors in the areas of education, labor, and healthcare. For the next hour, we'll get an inside look at happenings on the Hill, and the Congressman is ready to answer your questions. Stay tuned. Another View will be right back after this national, regional, and local news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. You know, the beautiful thing about living in our area is that there's always something going on, and I just want to tell you about a couple of things that you may be interested in. Tonight, our very own Lisa Godley, the producer of Another View, and also, I can't even remember her long title that she has here, but she does documentaries and produces a bunch of different things for the station. But she will be moderating a community conversation this evening about affordable housing in Hampton Roads. It's going to be at the Virginia Mocha from 6:30 until 7:30 this evening, and she'll be joined by artists and organizations like 4Kids and the Urban League, as well as community members who are all working to create awareness on issues of cost, quality, instability, overcrowding, and racial disparities in housing. So Lisa is the senior producer of diverse production and outreach here at the station, and she will serve as your moderator this evening. And then on Saturday, the 28th, from noon until 4 p.m. at the Slover Library, there's an event, The Fight Against Glaucoma, Expert Tips to Prevent Blindness. Now, this is being presented by Dr. Constance Okeke. And she wrote a book called the Glaucoma Guidebook, Expert Advice for Maintaining Healthy Vision. And this is in partnership with the Tidewater African Cultural Alliance and the Norfolk Little Creek Lions Club, and brought to you by New World Medical. So that is Saturday the 28th from noon until 4 at the Slover Library. Glaucoma is a major issue, particularly in the African American community. So that's some great information for you. And starting on February 3rd, I love this, our sister station, WHRO-FM, will begin airing a new 13-week series on Friday evenings at 9 titled Gateways Radio, which is celebrating the performances, artists, and artistry of the Gateway Music Festival and its outstanding orchestra, composed of 125 musicians of African descent. Now, this is really unusual in the orchestral world, so this is outstanding. And guess what? 2 of the members you may recognize. They are Hampton Roads' own Brendan Elliott, whose incredible talent and skill on the violin has been featured on Another View several times, along with retired Virginia Symphony principal violist Beverly Baker. So check it out, starting February 3rd, WHRO FM, Friday nights at 9. Our guest today is certainly no stranger to the 3rd Congressional District of Virginia, to the Commonwealth of Virginia, or to the nation. He has proudly served in Congress for 30 years, and from the look of things, he has no plans of slowing down. Please welcome to Another View, Congressman Bobby Scott. Hello there, Congressman. How are you?
Barbara, fine. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Now, I know you're in D.C. because you are busy doing the people's work. But my first question to you is, are you optimistic that this 118th Congress will deliver results this term despite its rocky start?
Well, it's a rocky start, and we have to see how the Republicans are going to govern. They've shown no ability so far. It took 15 votes to elect a speaker, and the speaker in real time was probably making deals behind the scenes. Some of them we don't know what he agreed to. Sham investigations, probably part of it. Cuts in Social Security, tax cuts for the wealthy. Committee assignments to people that will have control over getting bills to the floor. I mean, he made a lot of concessions to just a few people. Now, the margin he has, it's a tight margin, but it's exactly the same margin that Nancy Pelosi had 4 years ago when she was elected Speaker on the first ballot, and so we proceeded with the election and governing. There are a lot of problems. If you look at the direction we're going in, you have to separate. One of the problems we have is separating the rhetoric from the reality with the Republicans, because they talk about fiscal responsibility when the first thing they did was to adopt a rule that amended what we call pay-go in order to control the budget. We have under Democratic governing a thing called pay-go. If you have a new spending program, you got to pay for it with either new taxes or spending cuts. If you have a tax cut, you got to pay for that with spending cuts or additional taxes somewhere else. Pay-go, you pay as you go. They amended that to exempt tax cuts from being paid for. Now, if you don't understand that revenues have an effect on balancing the budget, it's just kind of hard to have an intelligent discussion about the budget when they exempt tax cuts as if it doesn't affect the budget. The next thing they did was pass a bill affecting the Internal Revenue Service that the Congressional Research, CBO, Congressional Budget Office said would increase the deficit by $100 billion. When they finally got around to electing the Speaker, that night they did those two things, exempted tax cuts from pay-go, and added $100 billion, over $100 billion to the deficit. So if you ask what direction we're going in, I don't know. We're just getting our committee assignments, and so committees will be formed and ready to go by Tuesday or Wednesday of next week.
So you're the ranking member of the Committee on Education and the Workforce. You were the chair last session when the Democrats were in control. What are your priorities for this term coming up?
Well, my priorities are the same. The majority obviously will be more in charge of setting the agenda, creating jobs, improving health care coverage, improving education. We were very successful. We had, in the American Rescue Plan, more money in the K through 12 education in the history of the United States. We distributed the money based on the Title I formula, so that where poverty is a major factor, so that those that needed the money most got the most money. And that is they're spending that to reopen the schools safely, keep them open safely, but mostly to deal with the fact that the children were out of school for the better part of 2 years, and that money is going to extra tutorial services, Saturdays in Hampton, Saturday makeup classes, summer programs to make sure that the children don't leave school after 12 years, after the 12th grade, with a diminished K through 12 education. So that's continuing to create jobs. In the first 2 years of the Biden administration, we created more jobs than any 2 years in the history of the United States. We want to keep that going. The Affordable Care Act is alive and well. We have the lowest number of Americans without health insurance, the lowest number without health insurance in the history of the United States, and we want to keep that going. We made improvements in child nutrition, particularly school lunches. We want to keep that going. So we don't know exactly what the new Republican majority might focus on, but we're going to be focused on those on the committee, protecting Social Security and Medicare will be a major challenge because the Republicans have made it clear that they want to cut Social Security and Medicare. In fact, they've used the debt ceiling, the threat of not increasing the debt ceiling, as a tactic to coerce cuts in Social Security and Medicare.
You know, Congressman, it sounds like there's a big fight ahead, number one. And I want to tackle several of the things that you brought up, starting with the whole idea of our children who lost momentum when COVID hit and so forth. But the other issue that we have is also school safety. And I know that recently you held a roundtable in Newport News after the shooting at Rich Neck Elementary School, the tragic shooting of the teacher by a 6-year-old. Tell us about that roundtable and what was your purpose in doing that?
Well, the purpose is to make sure that people were considering research and evidence in deciding what the response would be. I've been involved in crime policy for a long time, and one thing you learn early in dealing with crime policy is that you have to make a choice as to whether you're going to follow the evidence and research or you're going to follow slogans and sound bites. Now, the political thing to do is follow good slogans and sound bites. It helps you get elected, but it doesn't do any good. Some of the slogans actually increase crime. Some of the things that sound like they're doing something actually have been studied and increase crime. But I think it's important, in my judgment, to choose to follow the evidence and research. And there are a lot of responses to school shootings that do no good. Some may be actually counterproductive. And what we did is had 3 people who've been doing extensive research for many years, for decades, to present the research on what actually works to reduce the chance that school shootings might occur. One of the things they mentioned frequently were the fact that metal detectors are not effective. They may be effective, and if you have a good metal detecting system, they may change. They may move the next shooting from the school to the nearby 7-Eleven. But you haven't increased the safety of the children.
So what does work? What are the researchers telling you are evidence-based programs that actually do make a difference?
There are threat assessment strategies that have been designed and studied and shown to work. I think in the Rich Neck case, you had. I think the evidence is now showing that many people were aware that the child had the gun and didn't follow. Well, we're going to find out what happened.
Yeah.
But several people apparently were aware without the metal detectors. They knew. Okay, so the metal detectors wouldn't have added anything to what they already knew. But you need to make sure that the children have social emotional education, along with you need counselors in the schools. You need after-school programs, things of that nature, to make sure that they're not falling behind, because students who are falling behind tend to be disruptive. There are a lot of to make sure that students can read by the 3rd grade. I mean, there are a lot of initiatives that you can use that will reduce the chance, that research has shown that will reduce the chance that the child will be less likely to come to school with a firearm. One of the things is expectations. I mean, what is the administration, the teachers, and everybody? What do they kind of imply that they expect of the children? If they expect them to be nice, law-abiding children and do well, if you expect them to do well and graduate, if you expect them to be on the way to college, you treat them differently, and they will follow that guideline. If you treat them like little criminals every day, go through a metal detector, they pick that up too, and start acting like they're expected to act like little criminals.
Congressman, I wonder, is it? Can we legislate our way out of this issue of gun violence across the board? Is that the way to go?
Yeah. Well, but when you say legislate, I think you have to invest in initiatives that actually work and have been studied and have consistent with evidence and research. If you try to legislate slogans and sound bites that have no relationship to evidence, all you get is mass incarceration and no effect. But politicians do well because the slogans get them a standing ovation at a town hall meeting and help them get elected. And so that's the choice you have to make. Are you going to use the slogans and sound bites, or are you going to use the evidence and research to show what gets young people on the right track and keeps them on the right track? And that's the challenge that the school board members have now. We've got, I think they counted at least 40 mass shootings in the United States already this year.
Mm-hmm.
Those are mass shootings, not shootings. Mass shootings.
Right, mass shootings. 39.
And you know, there are things we can do in terms. I mean, we have a gun safety task force in the House that's been meeting since Sandy Hook, and the initiatives are the same. Assault weapons ban, reduce the size of magazines, background checks, close the loopholes, mental health, provision of mental health, crime prevention programs generally. We know the kinds of things that have been studied and work, and we can't get them passed.
Yeah, that's the frustration. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. What questions do you have for Congressman Bobby Scott, who represents the 3rd Congressional District in Virginia? From Virginia, 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. And audience, please, we cannot answer your very specific personal issues, but if you have a general question, please call in because we'd love to hear from you. So, you brought up the fact that there have been the 39 mass shootings first 3 weeks of 2023. How frustrating is it for you as serving on Congress for 30 years to see that we're at this gridlock, particularly when it comes to gun control?
Well, it's a partisan gridlock. And I said we've had a task force meeting since Sandy Hook. It is the Democratic Gun Safety Task Force. Democratic because we couldn't get any Republicans to join. And so we've been studying and coming up with initiatives. We passed a little bit of it last year. The great fanfare was made about the gun safety legislation that was passed in the last Congress. It was a step in the right direction, but it wasn't that much of an agenda. I mean, we did something, which was something we hadn't done in 30 years, but trying to get people to do anything has been a challenge just from a partisan point of view. You can't get Republicans to show any interest at all. And with the Republican House, I mean, we passed an assault weapons ban in the House last year, and you couldn't move in the Senate. There's evidence that limiting the size of magazines would make a difference. And in mass shootings, when they have to change magazines, that's an opportunity to intervene and fumble with the firearm, and that has been shown to have a positive effect. And you can't get the size. You have a limit on the number of bullets number of shells that you can have in a magazine when you go duck hunting.
Mm-hmm.
But not when you are going out with an assault weapon whose main purpose is to kill people quickly.
So how do we get the two sides? There's got to be some bipartisanship somewhere, is it not?
Well, I mean, we can't get them to move on anything, and it's up to the voters. I mean, it's the political thing, and when voters elect people that are against moving at all on gun safety, you can't be surprised that they come to Congress and don't do anything on gun safety. I mean, it's a political issue, and the voters, I think, have to take some responsibility. If you're going to elect people who don't want to move on gun safety, then that's what you get. But it is a very partisan issue. I mean, you can't get any of the Republicans to. Well, you had on the assault weapons ban.
Yeah.
You had a Republican member from New York, right after Buffalo, represents Buffalo, said he was going to support an assault weapons ban after an assault weapon killed many people in Buffalo, right in his district. Mm-hmm. That was on a Monday. On Friday, he had another press conference and said, as a result of the fact that every Republican elected official that was supporting his campaign had called him to withdraw their endorsements, he no longer had a viable campaign, and he was dropping his campaign for re-election. Now, he was still around when we had the assault weapons ban vote, and he was one of two Republicans to vote yes on the assault weapons ban. Now, so I mean, that's you don't have to ask some Republicans.
Yes, what is going on?
What's going on there?
And it's the politics that get in the way. Before we go to the phone, and the phone lines are lit up, let me ask you one other question. Tony DeCopel on CBS this morning, did a story about unemployed men. Saying that there are almost 800,000 jobs open across the nation, and that men who are in their working prime, which are 25 to 54, they're not working and they're not looking for work, and that this apparently has been a trend that's been going on for a while now. They said two big reasons: a skills mismatch and criminal records. And so my question to you is, because we swung the pendulum in education so far to the place of you have to go to college, trades aren't good, and so forth. And now we have this big need for people to work in the trades, HVAC, working with computers, that kind of thing. Do we need to rebalance that so that we can get everybody working?
Well, first of all, I think there is a recognition that a lot of the jobs, 2/3 of the jobs now require education past the high school level, but most of those do not require a 4-year college degree. Some education and training past the high school level. Legislation, I sponsored legislation that passed the House to create 1 million new apprenticeship opportunities. Welders, electricians, carpenters, as well as expanding the apprenticeship model to things like finance, insurance, technology, so that people could learn the skills necessary to get the good jobs. That passed the House on a couple of times, but we couldn't get it through the Senate. We passed the House legislation, what we call short-term Pell. That is, right now, the Pell Grant can be used for college courses that lead to a college degree. If all the course leads to is a good job, can't use the Pell Grant. Well, that's ridiculous. If it leads to a good job, you ought to be able to use the Pell Grant. Tim Kaine is working on that in the Senate, and I'm working on it in the House to make sure that we expand the Pell Grant in such a way that you can use it for courses that lead to a good job. That would make job training affordable, particularly at a community college where the Pell Grant would probably pay more than the tuition, so you'd have a little bit of a living expense so that you could actually afford to go. We've had a lot of other investments in job training. Just last year, we announced an $11 million investment in job training at a press conference that we were awarded for the Workforce Council. So we're putting a lot of money into workforce, and what we're finding is a lot of the jobs, like welders, there's a great shortage, and a lot of people that could probably do the work, but they need the skills training. And our job is to make sure that it's there. There are other problems we've got. Nursing there's a severe nursing shortage. It's getting worse. One of the challenges there is that the nurses, the shortage is so severe, the nurses do so well as soon as they graduate that you can't find anybody to teach.
Wow, because everybody's working.
Everybody, the students leave, and they're making more than the teacher.
Wow.
So why is the the teacher figures that out and goes and gets a job? So finding instructors in a lot of these positions can be challenging. But we need to make sure that the money is there. We're going to try to reauthorize the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, WIOA, this year to put more money into job training.
Okay. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the 118th Congress with Representative Bobby Scott, Congressman for Virginia's 3rd Congressional District. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. Congressman, I'm going to take some calls because our phone lines are lit up. Let's talk to Fred in Hampton. Hi, Fred. You're on the air.
Hello, Barbara and Congressman Scott. I'm gonna make it quick. I'm addressing the issue at Rich Neck School and the shooting and the act that we all know, or we're finding out what happened. My question is, when do we put the responsibility on the parents? Because I think everything was done. The red flags were raised. We had bullies on the playground. I grew up in Detroit and had to deal with going to public schools. Yeah, there are people out here who are bad kids. And then this young man had a gun, so they thought, and a couple of children were so-called snitches and told on him. And he still got away with it. He was identified as a troubled child, and his parents were coming to school.
Okay,
what role do the parents have in terms of responsibility for the act that occurred?
Okay. Thank you for your question. We appreciate that. Go ahead,
on the individual case, as you indicated, the parents were coming to school with the child. He had what's called an IEP under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. There's got to be a lot of review as to actually whether or not he was getting all of the services that the law required that he get. We're still going to get a lot of information. The fact that he could get access to a gun suggests that there's a problem right there. How is the gun accessible to a 6-year-old child? And that question.
Yeah, I think there are
a lot of specifics in this case.
Yeah.
But the parents, obviously, there's a lot we can do in the school to improve the situation. Involving the parents, obviously, would be extremely helpful. A lot of the programs have parental involvement, and a lot of the successful programs have parental involvement where you involve the parents in the sports and other activities, coming to school, and involving them is obviously very helpful. But if the parents are doing all they're supposed to do, we wouldn't have half the problems we've got. Sometimes you just got to take the hand you've been dealt. And there's a lot more that we can do with the children in the public schools that we're not doing because people have elected to follow the slogans and sound bites rather than the research and evidence. And most of the research and evidence are going to tell you there's nothing you can do that's going to solve the problem tomorrow afternoon. It's a long-term problem. And you mentioned the situation in Iowa. It was a gang problem. The gangs, you don't wake up one morning and all of a sudden you're in a gang. That is a slow evolving process where you should have cut that off in elementary school, and the trajectory that ends you up in a gang should have been dealt with very early. So your trajectory goes not into a gang, and once you join the gang, your life trajectory is all downhill anyway. You ought to be aimed towards college or career. and that's a totally different life.
Okay. Let's take a call from Thomas in Chesapeake. Hi, Thomas. You're on the air.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Barbara and
Hi.
Congressman Scott. I'm going to be short and to the point. One of the biggest issues we face in our community is gun violence. And the reason why gun violence is a big issue because the other social issues have not been dealt with over generations. The reason why we can't get gun legislation to move on anything, you've had mass shootings in Las Vegas and Sandy Hook, and these are in the white communities. In our black communities, we suffer every day. We cry, we lose children because the Second Amendment gives them the power to enforce all the rest of them. When you have the right to bear arms, and that's how you were able to take this country and hold on to this country, you're never going to get them to vote to have any gun control. So the only thing we can do is control what goes on in our communities. We have to have social programs, education programs, and we have to have community-based organizations that can actually reach these children and the parents before they get there, because you're never going to get the guns under control in their hands. Once the guns got out, that's the Pandora's box.
Okay.
They're not the fear that they legislate with is because we're coming in their communities, and that's how they say we're going to come in their communities and take their guns and rape their women and all that stuff, going all the way back to Woodrow Wilson. So the guns are not going to come out. We have to legislate based on the fact that if we can get social programs and jobs, you're not going to get the guns out their hands, because that's how they took America to start with. They're
Okay,
never gonna
Thomas,
get the guns out.
Thank you so much for your call.
Barbara,
We got that. And go ahead,
consistent
Congressman.
with what he's saying, I think if we invest in programs and get young people on the right track and keep them on the right track, those investments will go a long way in reducing the problems that we've got. And that is not a short-term, tomorrow afternoon solution. It is a long-term solution that starts very early but keeps them on track to be aimed at college and career rather than the cradle to prison pipeline. You got a cradle to college and career pipeline, and you have to invest every step of the way to make sure they stay in the right direction. So I think he's absolutely right.
Okay. Pam joins us from Yorktown. Hi, Pam. You're on the air.
Hi. When you have 40,000 people, fatalities every year due to firearms and well over 100,000 wounded, something is wrong with our country. And in Virginia alone, now granted, school shootings are in the minority compared to the one-on-one shootings on a daily basis. However, in Virginia, if you are a student who drives to school, under 18.2-308.1 of the Code of Virginia, under the exceptions in that statute, a student may possess an unloaded, unsecured firearm in their vehicle as long as it's in a closed container, and ammunition may be present in the vehicle. It's an expellable offense because in 1999, Phil Hamilton and I made it one, but we still cannot get the easy access in the heat of emotional distress out of the picture. And I think it's an abomination that neither Republican nor Democrat in the state of Virginia, in the General Assembly, is willing to carry that legislation.
Okay, well, we're talking about on the national level at this point, but I'll see if the congressman has a response.
Well, I mean,
Thanks for the call, Pam.
She's talking about the fact that it's easier to pass legislation allowing you to bring a gun on
on schools.
I was in the General Assembly before I was in Congress, and you always heard people talking about, well, you know, you got your hunting rifle in the pickup truck and you drive yourself to school. Should that be a criminal offense to have the hunting rifle in the pickup truck when you park in the school parking lot? And that's I think that's the exception she's talking about. It's easier to pass that than to pass legislation to restrict firearms.
Well, you know, Congressman, this still comes back to why it is so, and I'd like you to speak on this, why it is so important for us as citizens to pay attention and then vote for people who will work to get to the things that we feel are important to make our society work.
Well, that's what campaigns are all about, you know, talking about the issues and why we need to show up when they have candidate forums so you can hear what the candidates are saying. You've had, for a long time, you had no organized efforts opposing the gun lobby. You now have a few organizations, the Bloomberg groups, the Moms Demand Action, and some others that are kind of leveling the playing field so you can actually have a debate. But people need to, if you have opinions on it, you got to take sides and speak up at the town hall meetings, speak up at the candidate forums, support the candidates that you agree with, and oppose the candidates you don't agree with. That's the only way. And like I said, you've got people who the gentleman from Buffalo who dropped his campaign because when he came out for the assault weapons ban, he lost so much support that he didn't have a viable campaign.
Let's go to Jerry in Virginia Beach. Hi, Jerry. You're on the air.
Hi, thank you. Concerning the issues that, you have a hard time getting a coalition of legislators to vote yes on something that the majority of Americans know that they want, whether it's better gun control legislation or immigration reform or women's rights. There's many issues that the majority of Americans are in favor of, yet for one reason or another, we can't get legislators to prove it. I've joined
Hey, Jerry, we're Jerry.
For ranked choice
Jerry?
voting.
Okay, can you get to your question because we're running out of time?
Yeah.
Okay.
The question is, have you considered ranked choice voting as a solution to getting candidates that appeal to a broader spectrum of voters?
That's been debated in the General Assembly. They were talking about it as an option for local elections and probably might consider it. But the ranked choice voting will not change the problem of the fact that people are voting for candidates that don't agree with them. I mean, in Kansas, you mentioned choice on abortion. Kansas voted 60% in favor of abortion rights, and then turn around and elect all the statewide office holders are on the other side of the issue.
Yeah. So it's still...
if you expect people to agree with you on the issues, you got to listen and vote for the ones that agree with you on the issues. You can't vote for people who disagree with you on the issues and then complain they're not doing what you say.
All right, let's take one more call. Nick joins us from Yorktown. Hi, Nick. You're on the air.
Yeah, hello. Very good conversation. I'm curious why I'm disappointed a little bit in our legal scholars. There's several interpretations of the Second Amendment. If you read it, it begins with a well-regulated militia, comma, and then everything else follows. And the interpretation we're under now is called the individual rights theory. It used to be the collective rights theory, stating that, okay, if you've got a well-regulated militia, yes, then you're allowed to have a firearm. And so these Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, these are not well-regulated militias.
Nick, can you get to your question so that we can, because we're really running out of time, and I want to get in as many as we can.
Is there any movement back towards the collective rights theory where you give the states much, much more? Name me one state that's got a well-regulated militia. And
well, I tell you, all the states have a National Guard, and that's exactly what they meant by a well-regulated militia. Back in the 60s to maybe 70s, former Supreme Court Justice Warren Burger suggested that the idea that the Constitution had an individual right to bear arms was a fraud. That there was, as you have described it, is exactly how it is, and it goes on to say a people's right to bear arms. That is a collective right, doesn't say a person's right to bear arms. So that the collective idea, starting with the well-regulated militia, was the law of the land for up until about 15, 20 years ago, when they had a political decision and just changed the meaning of it. Now, trying to go back is difficult, because once you have a right, the general Supreme Court jurisprudence is once you have a right established, it's kind of hard to take it away. At least that's what the view was before the Dobbs decision that changed the Roe v. Wade. Maybe they've changed their mind on that, but generally speaking, once you have a right, it's kind of hard to take it away. But the collective right was the law of the land right up until the 1990s.
So clearly, Congressman, lots of people have lots of opinions about our gun laws. But let me ask you a question. I want to do a little bit of insider talk because we don't have much time left. And I really want to know from a personal perspective, and as much as you can tell us, what did it feel like on the floor during that vote for Speaker? What was the conversation? What was going on?
Well, it was embarrassing, and the really shocking thing was that it was hard to find any Republican that expressed much embarrassment about the proceedings. You had what should have been a perfunctory process, elect the Speaker, and you had more ballots taken than had been taken. I think 100 years ago, I think they had 9. So you got to go back about 150 years to find as many as 15 votes. I mean, it was just a total spectacle. It took several days. You couldn't. We hadn't even been sworn in. You know, the first order of business is elect the Speaker. Then the Speaker swears in everybody else. The reason they do that is if there's a contest over whether or not someone is eligible to be sworn in, you need somebody to preside over the debate. And so you need the Speaker first. It's kind of a chicken and egg situation. Who gets to vote for Speaker? Then you get sworn in. But the tradition is you elect the Speaker first, then you get sworn in, then you adopt the rules to the House. I mean, it was the following several days had gone by before we were even sworn in to do anything. I mean, it was an embarrassing spectacle, particularly in light of the public documentation of the kinds of deals that were being cut in the back room about committee assignments and who was getting the committee assignments, tax cuts for the wealthy. So whether we're going to cut Social Security, it was just a total embarrassment.
So are you guys on both sides of the aisle? Are you speaking to each other? Is anybody trying to work together?
Yes. We'll see more of that when the committees get established. That there's and a lot of bills come out of committee with significant bipartisan support. So more gets done than meets the eye.
Than it may appear.
a lot of things. Virginia Fox, who's now the chairman of the Education and Workforce Committee, and I worked on the surprise billing. That's where you go and use your insurance, and then all of a sudden you get some whopping bill that's totally unrestrained, where they just charge you whatever they want to charge you and expect you to pay for it. And because the anesthesiologist that you didn't know is not, quote, in network, and we had legislation that we worked together, and it's being implemented now to regulate that. We worked together on that, and a lot of other things that we've been able to work with. Most things, I think, the political issues of the day would probably disagree on.
Okay.
But I mean, there's a lot getting done. A lot of it sometimes it just has to be partisan. We passed legislation to protect 1 million people's pensions. Yeah. 1 million people are about to lose their pensions under the multi-employer pension program, and tens of thousands of businesses were in jeopardy of going broke because they were legally obligated to pay into the failing pension plans until the businesses went broke. And we were able to save those pensions in the American Rescue Plan. That's 1 million people, a lot of them in Hampton Roads, were able to continue their retirement with dignity rather than, I mean, if you've worked all your life and all of a sudden you've lost your pension, I mean, that you can't go back to work. You're too old.
Yeah, that's true.
And so a lot of good things happened over the past few years, and sometimes it's partisan, sometimes it's bipartisan.
Let's see if we can get one more call in. Greg joins us from Hampton. Hi, Greg. You're on the air.
Yes. Yes, Congressman, I want your perspective on the booming marijuana business. It's a help or it's a hindrance?
That's a local preference. If people,
because it's still federally, it's still not legal.
We ought to eliminate the federal prohibition against marijuana, because you've got some bizarre things going on. Like, since it is a federal violation, states technically can't legalize it, although they have eliminated the state prohibition. People set up businesses. The federal government says we're not going to prosecute. If the state doesn't have laws against it, we're not going to prosecute. And so everything starts working well until you get the banks, who are federally regulated, said we can't take, if somebody's running a drug operation, we can't take their deposits. So you get a lot of these people running a business and can't use a bank. We've been trying to remove that problem. So I think we do well just by getting out of it and let the localities do what they want.
Okay, thank you so much for the call, Greg. Congressman, what is the impact upon other congresspersons when you have a congressman who openly admits that he lied on his resume? Now he's facing campaign election improprieties. Obviously, we're talking about Mr. George Santos. How do Congress people process this, and the fact that he's being allowed to sit on committees, et cetera?
Well, the Republicans appoint him to committees. That's a Republican problem, and I think the news reports are coming out that a lot of Republicans knew that he wasn't who he claimed to be, so they'll have to answer for that and his committee assignments. He is under criminal investigation for campaign finance situations and for simple fraud. I mean, you were raising money over the mail, asking, saying certain facts that weren't true, and that send me money based on this. He's under criminal investigation for fraud. If it was up to the Democrats, I think he would have been gone a long time ago. But that's a Republican problem, and it diverts attention from our efforts to create jobs and improve health care, improve education, the kinds of things that address the housing problems, homelessness, the problems that are going on all over the country. And we've got this spectacle going on. I think the Republicans need to deal with it. And there's evidence that they knew before the election that he was the problem.
So you've been in Congress for 30 years. Are you worried about our democracy? I mean, does this feel different? Because I know there have been disagreements and partisanship and so forth over the years. But does this time feel any different to you?
I think the January 6th attack on the Capitol was different. I mean, you had an armed insurrection, and you were only seconds away. I mean, I think the evidence is that but for the police officer misdirecting the mob away from the Senate chambers, they would have overrun the Senate with senators still there. You had a dozen or more members of the House in the House gallery who were essentially captured by people. They couldn't get out of this door, that door, this door. There's only one door left, and they weren't sure whether it was safe, but it was the last opportunity, so they bolted out. It was safe. They just got away. There's no question, had the mob overrun people, it would have been. I don't think there's any. They were out to hang the vice president and kill other people. I think it was. We just, by a very thin margin, escaped without it being a lot worse. But I mean, the fact that you follow that after the insurrection, 2/3 of the Republican caucus voted to overturn the results in the election. I think, and none, to my knowledge, were punished politically. You would think that someone in that position would have been essentially disqualified from further elective office. But I mean, it's moving on. You've had many of the Republicans disparage the January 6th report. One famously said that if you didn't know better, it was just a bunch of tourists. You know that if that's the attitude, democracy is in jeopardy. I think people have to have confidence that we do the best we can and try to continue voting, continue electing the people that you can trust to do the right thing. But it's we came close to losing the democracy that day. I mean, had they, for example, overrun the House floor, the Senate floor, and in fact killed a number of people, it would depend on whether or not there were Democrats or Republicans to decide who was going to be in charge of Congress. And if 2/3 of the Republicans are voting to overturn the election, there's no telling where we would have ended up. Fortunately, none of that happened.
Yeah.
But it was close, and unless people really study the report and find out how close it came, and have some appreciation for the fact that you had an armed insurrection to try to overturn an election, and a significant number of elected officials showing no concern.
Yeah.
I think that I think people have to notice
what's going on. Before we go, Congressman, I want to read an email that I received this morning. It says, "Hello, Miss Barbara. I'm an avid listener to Another View. I'm so happy that you are having Congressman Scott on the show today. He has been a staunch advocate for work and people here in Virginia and across the country. He has truly changed lives by standing up for the middle class, and his efforts are truly appreciated. Please convey to him my sincerest gratitude and gratefulness for the work that he has done and will continue to do in the years ahead." And that's from Nick Jones, who is with Teamsters Local 822, and he's the Assistant Political Coordinator, Joint Council 83. So I just wanted to know that.
Let me tell you, when I mentioned the million people whose pensions were saved, the Teamsters were one of the beneficiaries of that. And a million people nationwide had their pensions saved, and Nick was one of the advocates to make that happen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Congressman Scott. We love you and we appreciate you, and we are so happy that you were here with us on Another View today. And audience, thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Another View. Please share this show with family and friends. You can go to our anotherviewradio.org and download the podcast. And join our family of followers by signing up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. Next week on Another View, we're going to be talking about relationships, African-American love relationships. How about that? With relationship expert Dr. Alvian Lyons. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Jordan Christie is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and be sure to join us again next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.